Hello students. To demonstrate the 16.5 Calculating Patient Balances case studies, I thought it might be helpful to see the information in a presentation. Some students have difficulties with calculating insurance math. I hear you, I'm not a math person myself. However, if you work through these cases, first on your own and then with me in this presentation, I think you'll have a better understanding of this topic. I will explain each claim case study to hopefully assist you with the comprehension of calculating balances. There will be similar cases on the final exam as well. Again, I would suggest doing 16.5 on your own, see how you do, test your knowledge. Then continue this video and check your work. I'll give you a hint, several of the patient balances are zero. Be aware that there are times when the patient will not have a balance. Claim Case Study 16.5, Patient Wendy Walker. The following information is received on an RA, Remittance Advice, from the Medicare HMO plan. The patient made a $10 copay at the time of the visit. We are viewing a snippet of her remittance advice from Medicare HMO. To quickly explain the RA, POS is the place of service, and we have learned about place of service codes in this class. Code 11 means the patient was seen at an outpatient clinic. Next, we have the procedure code, the CPT code 99204, which is an office visit. The amount billed for the visit was $150. The amount allowed from Medicare HMO is $103. Remember, if the provider agrees to an insurance plan, they also agree to lower fees. Review this from the first few chapters of the text if you need a refresher about this. The patient does not have a deductible, but is required to pay a $10 copay, which we know from the information at the top she paid at the time of the visit. The provider was paid $93. What is the patient's balance? Zero. The patient does not owe anything more. You can always double check by adding the copay, deductible, and what the provider was actually paid. The total should equal the amount allowed. Claim Case Study 16.6. Walter Williams, RA, from Aetna Choice is shown here. Note the patient made a $15 copay at the time of visit. $17 was billed, $16 was allowed. Again, the allowed amount is what Aetna Choice negotiated with their contract, and $16 is the most they'll pay for the procedure code 36415. There is no deductible. The $15 copay was paid at the time of the visit, the provider was paid $1, the patient's balance is zero. Walter paid $15, add the dollar that the provider was paid, and it equals $16, the amount allowed. Claim Case Study 16.7. Donna has several charges on the RA from Medicare nationwide. Notice in the deductible column she does owe $100. The patient needs to pay that first. She also has coinsurance of 20% of each charge. Adding up her coinsurance responsibility, Donna owes $26.80. Add the deductible column and the coinsurance column, which equals $126.80. This is the patient's balance. Another way to do this, or double check, add the charges in the allowed amount, which total $234, and subtract the total the provider was paid, which was $107.20. The remaining balance is $126.80, and this equals the patient's coinsurance and deductible. 16.8. The practice receives the following information on an RA from Medicare nationwide. The patient has met the deductible for the year. The important piece of information here is that the patient has met the deductible for the year. For procedure code 99397, the allowed amount is $118. There is no deductible due. Her coinsurance is $23.60. The provider was paid $94.40. What is the patient's balance? She owes the $23.60 for her coinsurance. Note that the allowed amount of $118, subtract the amount paid to the provider of $94.40 equals $23.60, which is the same as the patient's coinsurance and balance. All right, case study 16.9 is a little bit more difficult and requires a little more critical thinking. Joseph has two insurance carriers. The primary insurance received the claim first. We can see there was no deductible. There were copays which totaled $26.40. The provider was paid the remaining allowed amount of $105.60. The patient's copay amounts from the primary insurance plan can be submitted for possible payment from the secondary plan. Therefore, the patient's copay of $26.40 is submitted to the secondary carrier. The secondary insurance carrier requires a $15 copay for the 99204 office visit. Because this was not paid at the time of the visit, he still owes this $15. This is the patient's balance, $15. To understand how the provider's portions were calculated for the secondary claim, take each procedure line. For the code 99204, the coinsurance from the primary claim that was the patient's responsibility is $20.60. Subtract the $15 copay that the patient owes, and the provider is paid $5.60. Next, let's look at the procedure code 93000. The copay from the primary insurance that was submitted to the secondary payer is $5.80, and the provider was paid $5.80. The patient no longer owes this coinsurance as it was covered by the secondary payer. However, the patient does owe the $15 copay required by the secondary carrier. How are you doing? Are you staying with me? Is this making sense? I hope so. Case study 1610. Let's take a look at that. There is no deductible, no coinsurance. The provider was paid what was billed, which happens to be the same amount as the allowed amount. This is a workers' compensation claim, and that could be why the two are the same. Anyway, the patient doesn't owe anything. There are zeros in both the deductible and coinsurance columns. The patient owes nothing. Case study 16.11. Again, the important piece of information here is that the patient made a $10 copay at the time of visit. The billed amount is $63 and allowed amount is $34. There's no deductible. There was a copay of $10, which we know she already paid. The provider was paid $24. 24 plus 10 equals 34, which is the allowed amount. The patient owes nothing further. If the patient did not pay the $10 at the time of visit, she would have a balance of $10. In this case, however, she already paid it, so her balance is zero. For case 16.12, the practice receives the following information on two different RAs. The first payment is from Medicare, the primary payer. The patient has met the Medicare deductible. The second payment is from AARP, the secondary carrier. This patient has two insurance carriers, Medicare and AARP. Looking at the remittance advice for her primary carrier, which is Medicare, the patient has coinsurance of $5.60, and the provider was paid the remaining $22.40 of the allowed amount. We've learned that coinsurance due to a primary carrier can be submitted to the secondary carrier for possible payment. This is what has happened in this scenario. The provider was paid the $560. There was no deductible, no coinsurance, so the patient balance is zero after that secondary carrier. For patient Donald Aiken, the practice receives the following information on two different RAs. The first RA is from Medicare, the primary payer. The patient has met the Medicare deductible. The second RA is from the secondary carrier, AARP. Again, we have another Medicare patient with coinsurance due of $13.80 for the first charge and $3.40 for the second. The coinsurance amounts are submitted to the secondary payer and were covered, paid to the provider. The patient owes nothing. The secondary carrier covered the coinsurance amounts from Medicare. Claim Case Study 16.14. The practice receives the following information on an RA from Medicare nationwide. The patient has not yet met the deductible for the year. The allowed amount is $69. There is $26 due for his annual deductible. We know the patient needs to pay this first. Then there's a coinsurance of $8.60. The provider was then paid $34.40. If we add up the deductible and the copay for the patient, the total is $34.60. That's the patient's balance. Checking our math, we can add the patient's balance with the provider paid amount to equal the total allowed amount. $34.40 and $34.60 equals $69, which is the allowed amount. For the remaining cases, we don't necessarily have as much information. We'll break it down and use what we know. For claim case study 16.15, the payer is Medicaid. A copay of $15 was already paid at the time of visit. The provider was paid $17. What's the patient's balance? Total what has been paid. $15 copay plus $17 to the provider equals $32. This is what the allowed amount is. The patient's balance, therefore, is $0. Claim case study 16.16. The charge amount is $75 and the allowed amount is $50. There's a deductible due of $50. There is no coinsurance due. The provider was paid nothing. Why? The patient owes a $50 deductible. The patient's balance is $50. Patient Jose has Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield PPO. We can see the allowed amount is $135.10. Copayment was paid at the time of visit of $20. The payment to the provider was for $115.10. If we take the allowed amount of $135.10 and subtract the $20 copay and the $115.10 payment to the provider, we can see that there's a zero balance. The patient does not owe anything. Wilma has two insurance carriers, Medicare and AARP. We can see that the charge amount is $30 and allowed amount is $14. A deductible due is $7. She's already paid $93 of the $100 deductible that's due. She owes $7 yet. There's coinsurance of $1.40 then. The provider was paid $5.60. The coinsurance amount of $1.40 is forwarded to the secondary carrier who paid the provider the $1.40. What does the patient owe? The remaining balance of her deductible, $7. John's insurance is Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield PPO and has a charge of $150. The allowed amount is $105. The patient paid a $20 copayment at the time of visit. The provider was paid $85. Add the two payments together to total the allowed amount of $105. Therefore, the patient's balance is $0. Case study 16.20. The allowed amount is $34.50. Copay at the time of visit was collected at $10 and the provider was paid $24.50. When we add the payments of $24.50 and $10 together, it totals the allowed amount. The patient's balance is $0. Case study 16.21. Karen is also covered under two health insurance plans. The charge and allowed amounts are for $180. There's no deductible due, but there is a coinsurance of $36 that she owes. The provider was paid $144. The secondary payer paid the provider $28.80, which is 80% of the submitted amount. Karen's balance is $7.20, which is the remaining 20% of the $36 coinsurance. Another way to look at it, start with the $180 allowed amount and subtract $144 paid from the primary payer. We are left with $36, which is her coinsurance. The $36 coinsurance is submitted to the secondary payer because the information specifies the provider payment of $28.80 is 80% of the charge, we know the patient has a coinsurance of 20% due. 36 multiplied by 20% is $7.20. A few more to go. Stay with me. Case study 16.22. This patient also has two insurance plans. The charge and allowed amounts are both $75. There's a coinsurance of $15. The coinsurance is submitted to the secondary payer to see if they will pay. The secondary payer, Aetna Choice, requires a $15 copay which has not been paid yet. That $15 is going to be the patient's responsibility. The $15 is what the patient still owes. Claim case study 16.23. Marianne has TRICARE. The amount allowed is $90. There is a copay at the time of visit of $10. The provider was paid $80. If the patient paid $10 and the provider was paid $80, what's left? Nothing, right? The patient's balance is $0. Again, we could add that back up the other way. We could look at the provider was paid $80, copayment was paid at the time of visit already of $10, which equals $90, the allowed amount. Our last example, case 16.24. Medicaid's allowed amount is $57. A copay of $15 was paid at the time of his visit. The provider was paid $42. Again, the patient's balance is $0. Payments of $42 and $15 equal the allowed amount of $57, so there's nothing left for the patient to pay. Whew, we made it! Calculating patient and payer balances can be confusing. First, read all the information available and break it down. Thank you for walking through these cases with me. I'm hopeful you feel more confident determining balances for patients and payers. The end of the semester is close. Keep focused and finish strong. Have a fantastic week.